The animated Disney film The Lion King first came out in 1994 and easily became a critical and commercial success that continued the Disney Renaissance in the 90s, so it's fitting that it had to have a video game adaptation. Westwood Studios, yes, the one that defines strategy games with Dune 2 and the Command & Conquer games, developed the game and Virgin Interactive Entertainment published it, with other versions outsourced by different studios. Much like other Disney-themed games, most notably Aladdin, Disney animators helped with the visuals, but Disney also suggested something else. Make the game harder so it couldn't be finished in a rental. I barely got far in the PC-DOS version of this game as a kid, but I wasn't going to let that stop me, as I finally decided to complete this game and see if it was the Dark Souls of 90s Disney-themed platforming games.
It starts.
First of all, this game follows the story of the Lion King film fairly closely, where lion cub Simba gradually grows up and has to accept his role as king, only his uncle Scar gets in the way. It is actually surprisingly refreshing for a game like this, where you do platforming as a four-legged animal, but also see them growing up in the game and have a slightly different moveset on top of that. Simba's journey being adapted into the gaming medium also brings about a great presentation, as is expected from the aforementioned involvement of Disney animators. The game was released on multiple platforms, and for the most part the production values look and sound exactly the same across the different releases. The animation, least of all with Simba's movement or the idle leave the game on moment, is lovely. The levels have a great amount of detail even for a 16-bit game, and it's cool to see backgrounds such as Pride Rock. There are tiny glitches in the animation and even the scrolling of the backgrounds, but those are barely noticeable. What is more noticeable, however, are the different sounds and music across versions. Which one is the best? It's mostly a matter of preference, as well as wondering if the emulation featured in the Disney Classic Games collection this footage is from has at least been preserved. Overall, the soundtrack does reasonably well to replicate the film's iconic score, ensuring you may never stop humming your favourite song. The SNES version does have better quality instrumentation regardless of the use of MIDI, however the Genesis/Mega Drive score does have a slight edge and feels a bit more upbeat with its beat. The SNES one, though, does have a slight edge graphically if the title screen and the lighting in at least one of the levels is any indication, but it's very subtle outside of a slightly smaller resolution than the other version. The Game Boy version is different, and while certainly not as detailed, is actually reasonably impressive for an 8-bit handheld. Much of the background detail is lost, but Simba is animated nicely again, the levels look fairly similar to their 16-bit counterparts, and the Game Boy Color upgrade simply gives clarity to the sprites in the foreground. The music, including the homages to the film, sound mostly good, maybe even amusing, in 8-bit. So, this game may look and sound faithful to the film, but what about the gameplay? Well, it's very simple. You move Simba across 10 levels and just try to get to the end of each one without dying. Simba can move, jump, grab onto ledges and roar, with the adult Simba getting to scratch, maul and throw as a contrast to young Simba jumping on enemies. Simba can collect bugs plus extra lives and continues, and boy will you need those of the enemies, including those pesky hyenas and environmental hazards and bottomless pits give you trouble. And this is where we come on to the notorious difficulty. Is the game really that hard? Well, the first level is essentially easy with little to no problems. It's only the second level, based on the song Can't Wait to Be King, that is famous, where many a young player may not have even completed it and missed out on the rest of the game. The second level alone features a puzzle where you roar at monkeys to change the direction they throw you in. A text box at the beginning of the level indicates this, plus 2 ostrich riding sections that require absolute precision to survive, logs on water to jump on, and swinging rhino tails to grab onto lest Simba falls into the water. Those tails especially show that it is hard to control Simba sometimes, which is not helped with bad hit detection and cheap placements of enemies in environmental hazards. To grab those tails and other ledges properly draws the line between precision and luck. Then the third level is one of the first to crowd you with enemies such as hyenas and vultures, and it's not the last. The Stampede level is also notable, but at least feels fair when it comes to jumping around properly. But the levels after that features some of the most cheap and nasty things. Constantly falling small rocks, boulders that go after Simba Indiana Jones style, tricky vertical platforming sections such as a waterfall of logs, So much for Hakuna Matata meaning no worries. One of the last levels titled Be Prepared, and not based on the song, but from an apparently cutscene of a film, is one of the worst, or at least more challenging, levels in any 2D platforming game ever. It features the reappearance of hyenas and leopards, falling lava droplets, mini volcanoes, bats that especially want to knock you into the lava while you're on a moving rock, checkpoints being really spread out to the point it feels like they're not there, and then the final moment where you have to... seriously, who could even figure out what to do with these lava pits? Analysing this, it feels like the difficulty purely lies in controlling Simba properly when it comes to vertical or horizontal jumps and ledge grabbing, not to mention the cheapness of enemies and hazards, and a few times where it's not clear what to do, including the aforementioned lava pits and even the final boss battle. Now, to be fair, there are a few aspects of the game that can help with these difficult moments. There are checkpoints and bugs that can replenish Simba's health. If you do look around the levels a little more for secrets, you can find bugs that permanently increase the life and raw meters of Simba, making handling enemies that bit easier. Then there are 1-ups and continues, and especially a specific kind of bug that leads you to a Timon and Pumbaa minigame in between levels, which, if played right, can really increase Simba's life and continue counters. Speaking of life counters, there actually is a difficulty level selection which determines the number of starting lives and the number of times some enemies have to be hit before they die. The difficult run is one of the hardest 2D platforming experiences you could ever put yourself through. You start with no lives and continues, which means you have to find them, and enemies take more jumps and slashes to beat, which feels mostly nigh on impossible if you're crowded by enemies, who can also respawn if you're going the wrong direction in a maze level, and have to be defeated before you go in another direction anyways. And then there is the Game Boy version. Again, the Game Boy and Game Boy Color versions do have good production values, including somewhat weird but still commendable stills based on the film, but that is mostly it. The game removes the monkey puzzle from level 2, changes the Stampede level to a top-down perspective, and removes the extremely hard to be prepared level, which are all sensible changes, but my gosh, the controls and camera in this one. The jumping and ledge grabbing are harder to get right, and most of all, parts of the level that you would normally be able to pass through without glitching or compromising the difficulty in the 16-bit versions are basically annoying ceilings and walls that you have to make sure Simba doesn't bump into. This makes at least 2 bugs that you can normally get to the 16-bit versions virtually impossible to collect. And the first adult Simba level that is actually my favourite in the first place is changed into a mazy, enemy-filled nuisance. This made it almost hard to stand the handheld versions, which may as well be the hardest versions. Not unless you choose the easy cup difficulty and only give the end credits after 4 levels instead of completing all of them. Why? There is also the apparently bad NES version and other ones, I know, but I've not played those. So yeah, experiencing The Lion King has basically amounted to finally completing a game that I did not get to the end of as a child. But was it worth it in the end? Is it the Dark Souls of 90s Disney-themed platforming games? Well, on a very positive note, the game's production values are great, and the game is certainly playable and beatable, where there are more than a few moments and mechanics that are solid and fun to play with. There is no doubt that the game was made to be deliberately hard during development, but then again, maybe through perseverance, maybe when you're a child, or just gaming experience credentials, this game may be a little easier than you think. For me, I mostly use save states and rewinds. Don't be ashamed of using those. The game could have been made a little easier, or at least better in terms of controls and precision. Maybe this was a given with a fair number of other Disney-themed games like this, but I remember actually going further in those, or at least completing them. Overall, The Lion King is actually a good 2D platforming game, and certainly appealing to fans of the film. If you stick with it, you may be able to get to the end after many continues and game overs. Whether you're discovering or even rediscovering this game, just be prepared for a challenging experience.